And that the common term that's used is the MTD, the maximum tolerable downtime. And what this means is the team will have to actually calculate what if a resource goes down, how bad is that? And a lot of times, because it's revenue oriented, like a company can figure out that through their web server, their e-commerce site, they make $3.2 million every hour, something like that. Well, if that goes down for 1 hour, they could potentially lose that much revenue. And some resources may only cost them $1,000. But the goal is to figure out how long can these specific resources be down, how bad will that hurt us, because that has a direct relationship with the type of recovery solution we're going to put in place. If it has to be up and running within a minute, then we're going to have some type of redundancy that's always on. Maybe it's hot swappable hard drives, co-processing, multi-processing, which we'll talk about. If it doesn't have to come up for like 24 hours, then we could do something not as critical. Maybe it's we'll have our tape backups. Maybe we could wait on the vendor to do replacements. So that's the correlation between the MTD value. We have to basically categorize what's most critical, and that helps us determine what type of recovery solutions and backup solutions we'll put in place. So MTD value, this is a terminology used by NIST and on the CISSP exam. And the company itself, your organization, can actually come up with its own categories, critical, vital, non-essential, those types of things. But this terminology is very common in the industry and specifically on the exam. So here's some interesting examples of what type of failures that could be identified, and these would be threats. Now, one thing to understand is that we're going to look at the type of threats that need to be identified, but the team actually doesn't look at what do we do if a flood comes, and they have a whole plan for that, and what do we do if a hurricane comes, and they have a whole plan for that. What do we do if a terrorist attack happens, and they have a whole different set. That's not how you develop business continuity plan. It doesn't matter what the outside impact or what actually causes the damage. It's the damage itself. If our network goes down, what do we need to do? If our e-commerce sites go down, what do we need to do? If our facility is blown away, what do we need to do? It doesn't matter what causes it. So we have different failure types here and recovery actions. And so failure of UPS, what are we going to do? We have a redundant UPS that will take over. Failure of disk drive, we can have RAID in place, which we talk about in operations, but that's just a redundant array of inexpensive disks to ensure that if one disk goes down, we still have our data. So here's different examples. Database failure. Well, we can have disk shadowing, or we can have backups of our database to ensure that we can recover from that. So, and the team is going to indicate how many minutes or how many hours or how many days that the specific resource has to be up and running. Now, I said that MTD is, NIST uses it, and that's why it's on the CISSP exam. Most of the things on CISSP exam you can find in NIST documents, which are the best practices for the industry. Even though a corporation, an organization can come up with their own categories, like I said, you can define what critical is. Maybe critical is 2 minutes. Maybe normal is 3 days. Even though the company can come up with this, for the exam it would be a good idea if you knew what NIST lays out. Because NIST is basically, best practices, that is a framework that organizations can follow. It's not a standard, but it's best practices. So it would be a good idea for the exam that you have the correlation of non-essential would mean that it it needs to be up in 30 days. The resource needs to be up in 30 days. If it falls in the category of important, then it means it needs to be up in 72 hours. If it's urgent, it needs to be up within 24 hours. So it'd be a good idea to know those categories and the time that's equated to them. So we'll quickly look at some threats, but there's a lot of threats that the team will need to look at because a company could be affected by many different things.